Hi, hello, Wagwan. Thanks for joining us on another episode of The Group Chat. Today we'll be talking about breaking generational habits while raising the next generation. And I have here with me to go deeper into this conversation, Kimmy.
Hi, everybody. What's going on? I'm very interested in continuing this conversation about generational health.
Okay, before we dive into this conversation, we'll be doing a quick little icebreaker where I'm going to have Kimmy pick a question out of our bowl here and answer it for you guys. She has no idea what these questions are, so this ought to be
Nerve-wracking.
fun.
All right, let's go. I hope I don't get a bad question. Oh, okay.
Should have shuffled them more. What does that one say?
What item do you hope will be obsolete in 10 years?
Okay.
That's a good one.
That is a good question.
That's a good question. Obsolete in 10 years? Probably irons. I mean, I don't use an iron much anyway, but like I just hope we don't have to, get to the point where we don't need to iron or press our clothes. You know what I mean? There's something that helps us, some new technology that helps us to just keep our clothes straight. You know?
Well, but they do have a steamer.
Yeah, but that still work. That you still have to manually go and
Do
steam
something.
it. So it's just like a hot box. You just put your clothes in
Ooh.
and then you take them out
Okay.
and
I feel like China probably already did that. They're definitely way ahead on the technology. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and jump right into the questions pertaining to the topic. What is generational habits or generational curse to you? Like, what do you think of when you hear that term? Because I feel like it's thrown around so often.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a little bit of a loaded one. And I think, this whole term or coining of generational health and curses and that kind of stuff is fairly new in terms of we probably are the first generation to really even consider these kind of things and the actions of your parents, grandparents, etc. But to me, it just means things that have been carried on for years within your line, your family line, that have perpetuated stereotypes, harm, um, toxicity in our families. Um, yeah.
I never really thought about the fact that we are slick, the first generation to really be honing in on wanting to really break those generational habits. Like I never thought about why didn't our parents try to undo it?
And I don't even think it's a matter of trying to break it. I think it's a matter of the first people to even recognize that something exists, like a problem. There's a problem that needs to be fixed. So the first thing is just the acknowledgement of, nah, this don't feel good to me.
Yeah.
And then secondly is just like, what can I do about it? And I think that's where we are right now, because our parents for sure, my parents for sure, were not aware enough to do something. That's just life. That's just who they are. You hear their whole life growing up. My parents did worse, or you never go through what I go through, or I'm doing the best that I can. And not to say that they weren't, and that's the point. They were just doing the best that I can without any thought of what else. Like, how could I improve? How could I be better? And I think, just being here right now, we're kind of like in a time of where people are becoming a little bit more aware of themselves. So
yeah. And I know for us, like, it became so much like almost a rebellion, wanting to do things different. It was because of tradition that has been passed down. It's like, kids stay in their place, you do what you're told. These are the rules. This is how we live our life. And
because
you're
I
going to
said
come,
so.
right? Then we're going to come behind and we have to follow what was already in place. And us not wanting to do that, I think we spent a lot of years feeling like we are on a rebellious end of things, being rebellious towards our parents. So for a long time, I don't think it was even seen as the right thing to do, to want to undo the things that our parents did that has affected us in our adulthood and have us out here like,
Yeah.
When was the first time you realized that you wanted to break generational curses, or when did it come to you that I have to do things differently?
I think this has always been a journey I've been on, even before I knew I was on it. Growing up in a Caribbean household is not for the weak. And I think, just being a child of parents who were, one, very strict, and two, just very stuck in the way in which they did things, was my way or the highway kind of situation. like you said, it was a rebellion at first because, being a teenager, especially in navigating yourself, you're trying to figure out who you are, and then having parents who don't help the situation. You kind of are mini versions of themselves and less of you. And I think it started there. I think it began in a place where I just didn't want to do the same things. And I knew for sure that whatever was happening to me, it did not feel good.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like the feeling. And then I became a mom at 18. And I think that really was a part of my trajectory as well. It's a part of where I am right now. Just being a mom at that young age, you're still figuring out yourself. Where I'm a kid with a kid, and just trying to figure out and navigate how best to raise her and, figure me out at the same time. So I think, it began before I knew it did. And then intentionally at 18, it's just like I really wanted to do things differently. I had her at a time where I was still living with my mom. And, there's a lot of antiquated beliefs and a lot of do this and don't do that. And, you constantly feel like you're not good enough, and you constantly feel like, you're making a mistake. And I think it was just born from there, just like out of a strong desire to feel
Mm-hmm.
enough and to feel competent and to feel as though I was in charge of the things that were happening to me and the things that were happening to my kid as well. So, yeah.
I know for me, I think it really came pretty much when I was pregnant. It
Yeah.
was kind of
Parenthood will do that to
like
you.
definitely was a difference maker, because it's like, okay, I'm about to become a parent now, and I'm responsible for this kid. And looking back at my own life, I'm like, like you said, our parents did the best that they could. But I'm just like, there's something missing. There's something more. There's something that I need to understand. There's something that I need to learn. And I had no idea what that was, but I knew for sure that I was going to figure it out. And because I'm like, I'm responsible for this kid and I need him to get it sooner than I got it, because now it's like, I'm an adult and I'm expected to have it figured out and I don't. And I have to do all of that while still navigating adulthood, responsibilities, bills, and all of these things. So it's just like, okay, what, how am I going to like make this difference? Like,
That's where it begins first. You throw,
mhm,
after the anger and the angst comes empathy. A lot of empathy and sympathy for your parents,
mhm,
for your grandparents, and everybody involved in this long line of mess, because they honestly did not know any
no,
better. And a lot of these things are one, systematic. It's
mhm,
coming from systems.
that
It's
is
coming
true.
from years of things embedded in a way to keep you in a certain place. And even systematic, right? You want to do better than that, so your parents kind of push you to do better than them, and in a way it's painful.
Yeah,
Going through that, the growing pains of experiencing that, it's hard.
yeah, that it definitely is. And what was it like for you with incorporating, because you know how they say, right, it takes a village to raise a child, right?
For sure.
But here we are coming to the place where we're realizing that, okay, the way the village is doing things, it's not necessarily wrong. It's just, it can take some adjustments, it can take some changes, it can take some improvement. And how do I allow my village to still be there for me and my child while putting up those boundaries? Like, okay, I know that's what y'all did with me, but we're not going to do this with my kid. Because I know one of the things my son and I have talked about is like, when it comes on to like yelling, right? He expressed to me how that made him feel, and it obviously didn't make him feel good. And I had to have the conversation with him, like, what we know is that my mama yelled, my mama
Listen,
yelled.
I'm trying to tell you, and a
So
little short to get short pun.
it,
It's been a lot.
yeah.
Yeah.
So how have you like dealt with trying to put up those boundaries between like your village and the changes that you're making for your child?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think boundaries is kind of a hard topic for me, seeing as, I struggle a lot still with enforcing boundaries. And I think it's even harder still with your family. I think the people around you, they mean you well.
Mm-hmm.
And, but, some of the things and beliefs are just not my own. We don't have the same values half of the time. Um, I mean, it helps too that I have distance. So, most of my family members are further away from me. So I get to kind of navigate parenthood the way that I see fit.
Mm-hmm.
But when there are instances where, they're around and we're around each other, it's just been more about having conversations about how I am gonna handle things and how different things have to be because of the child I want to raise.
Yeah.
The hardest conversation has probably been with my mom. And, she's very stuck in her ways, and my child and I both grew up with her. We were living with her for a while, so it has been a little bit harder trying to just let me take the reins. But I think for the most part, my mom is pretty much on board with the way that I parent Addison.
Okay. I was gonna add to that, but before I do, how long did it take for your mom to get
Oh,
it?
Addison is 10,
So about
and
10
I
years.
moved 3 years ago, and it's been 3 years.
Okay. Okay.
I think the first year of me moving was very rocky because she just didn't understand why.
Hmm.
She didn't understand, and I felt like at the time that wasn't something I could explain. It was just something I was feeling. And I think sometimes that becomes a hard thing, right? Is that sometimes they can't understand because it's not really meant for them
Yeah.
to understand. And I feel like sometimes you can't really explain to people who are, intent on misunderstanding you. That's another thing. And sometimes things are just for you, your journey. And I think sometimes it would be, you look at it like a mistake. Someone else would look at it as a mistake, but for you, you feel it. Like,
Mm.
that this is what you need to do in order to take it to the next step. And it was rocky. At first, she didn't understand. She used to say a T for a pitney, a T for a grand pitney. But I think now we're at a place where she really is giving me room to be the parent that I want to be
That's awesome.
to
That's
Addison.
awesome. I know for me and my mom, the communicating part was the challenge, right? It's like I had all the ideas in my head, but to be able to articulate it for her understanding was a
And that's a
challenge.
problem. I think it gets to the point where you have to explain to another person what you just know intrinsically to be true for
Yeah.
you is hard. That's the hard part. Is like saying, hey, nah, I'm gonna homeschool instead of sending to school, and then trying to figure out a way to get them to understand why you made that decision. Because I know you homeschool,
Right.
and that's been a struggle.
And I think that's why I said to I knew I wanted to do things differently when I basically had my son. And since his birth I was like, I'm going to homeschool him. And pretty much everybody was like, you can't do that.
Yeah,
No, he
yeah,
needs school. He has to go
yeah.
to school. He's not going to be able to socialize. You can't do it by yourself. And I'm just like, at that point I think that's when the Scorpio in me was like, watch. Okay. um
Yeah,
because you can't tell me that I can't do that when I know that I know the benefits of it, right? And I know I went through the school system. I went through a school system in Jamaica, in New York, and here in Atlanta, and seeing the difference between the cultures, the way the system is ran, realizing that here in Atlanta they lower the standards to meet the kids instead of challenging the kids.
yeah, for sure,
I'm like,
for
why would
sure.
I want to put my kid through that same thing just for him to come home for me to undo everything? Right now, we're here in a space where we're growing and trying to unlearn the things that affected us negatively in the long run here in adulthood. Um, and then, trying to get on the forefront of giving that to our kids. So it's just like, well, I'm going to give this a shot. And I did, of course, say whatever decision is best for my son, I'm going to make that. So if it came to the point where I'm like, okay, this homeschool thing is not working, I'm not fit to do this, like I'm about to lose my crap, then of course I would have just sent him to school. But it, I think it's that burning desire within us to make that difference is what pushed me to like do it, not even sure if I was going to be able to do it.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too. I think that parenthood has helped in, even in terms of like generational health and doing things in a different way. Is sometimes, just the knowledge that sometimes if things don't work out, it's okay to start over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to do it again, and it's okay to try it again. The point is to not just do something because somebody told you to do it, or that's one prescribed way of doing things. The point is to figure out what works for you and yours.
Yeah.
And I think it's a journey to getting to that point, but just requiring a lot of grace in between that as well. So it's
Yeah.
just like, if you never work, you start over.
After coming into like adulthood, what was one of the most vital things that you've learned that you knew you needed to unlearn to be able to teach your kid a different way of doing it?
I think one of the top things that comes to my mind with that question is definitely patience.
Mm.
And that's been something that, like with most things, is struggle. You know what I mean? My parents did not have a lot of patience. I feel like, you know, it might not only be a Caribbean thing, but just speaking to what I know. But
Yeah.
Caribbean parents is like, sit over there, you're not seen, you're not heard, like over there. And one of the things for me is just learning to not be agitated
Mm-hmm.
when she comes with to me with things, and learning to just sometimes breathe and take a breath and calm down and listen and really listen and be present. So, patience and presence. So I
Yeah.
think those are the two things for me that, like, I think those are the most important things as it comes to your
Your
kids.
kids.
Is
Yeah.
it's a lot of patience. It's a whole lot of patience. And a lot of being present. A
Yeah.
lot of, like, really listening and opening the ears, and not just listening to respond, but listening to understand, comprehension,
Mm-hmm.
where they're coming from, being able to assimilate with them, and not turning everything into like a learning lesson. Or sometimes just letting them feel their emotions and letting them come to you as raw as they are, and letting them just speak, and just being present with them there. So yeah, those are the things that I would say.
I can definitely agree with the patience. In addition to the whole yelling thing, that I'll probably talk about another time. And
And even like with the patients, right, it comes even into punishment or discipline, because I used to get enough lick. And I
mm-hmm.
think the licks were from a lack of patience. I think a lot of the discipline that came in the household was from just being so irritated and angry and just lashing out and just doing the first thing that comes to your mind. And your child does something and you give them an unrelated consequences, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the beating never solve none.
Yeah.
You just beat me because you
And
want
that's
to
all
get
I
it out of the
remember.
way. You're angry and you're impatient. And I think what has really helped me even in, the disciplining aspect is like taking a breath,
Yeah.
taking a moment. You're angry and you woosah 2-3 times, and you're like, yeah, I really want to lick you. I really feel like, you know, but hold it. When you calm down, you speak to them in a manner that's respectful and in the
Mm-hmm.
same way that you'd want to be
Res-
spoken to.
that right there. Parenthood definitely like really teaches you patience. Like becoming a parent, I know that for a lot of other parents that I've spoken to, it's like a lot of parents don't have the patience to deal with their kids,
For
and
sure.
it teaches you that. And you had said something in regards to like also being able to listen, right? In addition to that patience, being patient with your kid, allowing your kid to be a kid, also listening to your kid. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the most vital things for me. Like I have a lot of conversations with my son. I try to hear and understand what he's feeling, and I also try to explain things to him. Sometimes when I make a decision, or like for example the whole yelling thing, right? If I yell at him, I have to explain to him there's good yelling and there's bad yelling. And having that conversation helps him to understand, say, okay, so he doesn't feel as bad anymore when I do yell. Because I did tell him that I'm going to try not to yell as much,
Yeah.
but it's deeply rooted in us, right? In our
Yeah.
like the yelling thing is like second nature. As soon as they do something, the first thing,
Hey, what you do?
exactly,
Don't
right?
touch that.
So it's
Yeah.
like I've asked him to be patient with me, because it's the same thing like going through this journey of breaking generational habits. We have to be patient with ourselves first before anything else, because we're figuring it out, and we're figuring it out on our own, because like there's no blueprint right now
There's no
towards
manual.
parenting, one,
Yeah.
adulting, two, and breaking generational curse. So it's like we're facing all of those challenges simultaneously while still trying to figure our own selves out, who it is that we are within all of these different arenas. And it can be overwhelming sometimes,
Yeah.
So I think patience with ourselves and having that open communication with our children, so far it has made a difference for me, because my son doesn't do, he's not, I know I'm bad picnic compared to, like, I've seen bad picnic, I know a bad picnic. um I haven't had to yell at him much, I'm not to beat him much. The whole gentle parenting thing, I didn't say, oh, I'm gonna be a gentle parent. I just knew I was gonna do things differently.
And I think a point is just that being an intentional parent. So I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a gentle
Yeah.
parenter either. I think more along the lines of an intentional one. And I think intentionality is what helps you to do things different, to just do things in a different way, because you're not just doing things because of what you grow
Mm-hmm.
up and you see and you hear and you learn. No, you're doing things the way that feels intentional to you and your kid,
Mm-hmm.
in the best ways for them and for yourself.
And so, do you feel like you've had to raise yourself as you've been going through this
Absolutely.
journey?
Absolutely. I always say, we grew up together, and I think every parent experiences that, but I think, like, we grew up together. The last 10 years have been an extreme roller coaster, and we've been through the trenches together. I would definitely say, like, coming in onto my own at 18, and then now at the end of my 20s, and her being 10 years old. Yeah, we did A lot of growing pains.
So it's been almost a decade now for you, right? That sounds like such a long
Actually, it
time.
is a decade.
It is?
Yeah.
Okay, so it has been a decade. It has been a complete decade for you now.
Yes, ma'am.
Like, how can you sum up, like, how would you sum up everything that you've learned in that entire decade that can help someone else who is trying to navigate the same thing, who's just starting out their journey?
So, like as we've been discussing, I think the top thing for me is grace,
Mm.
and a lot of it, like bucket loads. And I think you can never give yourself
Mm.
enough grace. And I think there are moments where I am really hard on myself because I know what I want from this whole experience with myself and with my kid, and just to do things in a different way. I want her to feel loved and honored and respected and cared for, and I want her to be able to pass that on to her peers, her family, her friends. Um and it's not easy because you're still going through things, and sometimes you revert back to your old ways. Sometimes it's easy to fall into old habits and patterns, and like you said, there's no manual. So for me, one of the top things is lots of grace. Lots
Okay.
of grace, lots of grace, lots of patience, lots of understanding, and a lot of just like sitting with yourself first. And I think it's so important to, as we're talking even about generational curses and stuff, there is a lot of empathy because I realized that, parents didn't really take care of themselves.
Mm.
And that's one of the top reasons why they were so tired and stressed out
Yeah,
and miserable and
that's so
angry.
true.
There was not a lot of room to be present for themselves. So even recognizing that is just being intentional about me.
Yeah.
So, everything I believe comes from you, and it just comes from, a place where I recognize I can never be good for my kid if I'm not good for me first. So, just taking the time out to honor yourself as well, I think is one of the key things that I've learned in this whole 10 years.
Yeah, that is so true. I lost it.
So you can't lose things, bruh.
But no, that is one of the things I also realized is that, like, I can't be mad at my mom. I can't be mad at my grandma because they didn't know any better. And they could have only given, what they had. Their cup was not full either. They were just focused on trying to put me in position to do better than they did.
Mm-hmm.
I know, I've heard my mom say it so many times. I just want you to do better than me. I just want you to do better than I did. And I realized that, she resents herself, and I realized that she never really lived up to her full potential
Mm-hmm.
because she was so focused on trying to do so much for me that
Yeah.
she completely forgot herself.
Yeah,
And I
just
think that's where we kind of like lose the sight of actually doing the best for our kids because we have to that's one thing the self-care community has learned is that we can't do for anyone else until we take care of
that's true.
ourselves.
That is absolutely true. Everything
Yeah.
you do comes from you.
Yeah.
So just recognizing that, I think, has been really critical to where I am right now, and like just the level of relationship
Mm-hmm.
she and I are able to have, and the relationship I'm able to have with myself.
Yeah. And I want to wrap up on this note. Like, what is the one thing you wish that your village, or especially like your mom, understood about where you are currently, and how they can best support you as you continue this journey for another couple decades?
Um, to just trust me
Mm.
that I've got it, and if I need help, I'll ask. Like, I don't want any unsolicited advice, and I know you mean well, but sometimes you give advice from your perception or your scope of things, and it doesn't really relate to where I am. So just trust in me
Mm-hmm.
that I'm okay, and we got it.
And I think that is a big one because I think my mom is so terrified that I'm just gonna like fail at this whole parenting thing. Like even after I've taught my own kid how to read, I've done so. I'm
Yeah,
like I could have been doing a lot worse, right? Things aren't perfect or ideal, but do have to have trust one within yourself, first before anything else. So I think I'm going to agree with you on that one. Wishing that they would just trust us more to do what's right. Like you said, if it comes to the point where we realize that it's not working or
yeah,
something is right,
yeah.
we'll reach out for help. Yeah,
And even if you're making a mistake, it's your mistake to make.
yeah.
And I think that's one of the things is like trying to save us all the time from the mistakes doesn't work.
Doesn't work. Does not.
I think it's just a matter of like, I appreciate you so much for wanting me to do better and be in a better place. But sometimes these experiences are what help you,
Mm-hmm.
to shape you and to teach you things. So I think, sometimes you have to make a little mistake.
I think my mom has finally, after all these years, finally accepted that I need these mistakes. I needed this journey to bring me to where I am now.
Yeah.
So I think, I feel like you said, the communication we've been doing with our parents. So I feel like they have been a little bit softer, in their approach when trying to,
Yeah.
communicate and
My
understand
mom for
what it is
sure
we're
is
doing.
is is a far away from where she used to be, and
Yeah,
I'm grateful
me too.
for that as well.
Me too. For the both of us, for sure.
For sure.
So that wraps up this conversation here today in the chat. I do want to hear from you guys to go ahead and add in the comments some of the things that you've experienced as you've been breaking generational curses, habits, however you want to refer to them in your family dynamics, how they've been a benefit to you, and how you've overcome the obstacle of relaying that to the people that are in your life that do truly love and want to support you. And that's that.
Thank you guys for having me. I hope that you guys, were able to take away from this conversation, something, a lot of
Yeah.
grace, a lot of
Yes.
empathy, a lot of patience. But yeah, see you guys next time.